Oh, she is extremely strong, y'all. This is the lovely Maiden Cartethyia, and it is time to deliver the mastery freaking guide for this little lady right here. I mean, she becomes a big lady too. You know, once she transforms, she becomes giant lady. Ah! But nonetheless, this is Cartethyia and Fleurdelys, who she transforms into. She's strong. She's crazy strong, but she has the greatest weakness that the game has ever seen, of course, and that is, well, elevated platforms. Yes, walls. Walls. Cartethia's transformed state of Fleurdelys cannot run up walls. She also can't jump. I mean, she can, but she can't. Her jump is literally an attack. So, yeah. As hilarious as this is, though, let's dive in because this character is an absolute behemoth. So we have a lot to discuss here. Let's go. Whoa. Yay. By the way, please be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out tremendously. Thank you very much. So a quick overview on Cartethyia is that she scales off of HP. She loves HP. Check out all the freaking modifiers just off the jump right here. All the modifiers are HP, 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 HP freaking everywhere. She loves HP, okay? So that's the biggest thing you want to understand about her, is that she loves HP. That's her favorite thing. So that lets you know how to build her already from the jump, okay? If you're wondering, oh, well, should I build her with an emphasis on HP? Obviously, yes, you should. Okay, she also wants basic attack damage as well. As you will see this outlined through the life of her skills as well. It will say basic attack damage. Consider basic attack damage. So you want these are the key things that you need to know about her overview on her modifiers and like her stats and stuff like that, without us jumping fully in yet. And then of course, other stats that you're really going to go for are your typical stats, such as, but more so your crit rates, your crit damage, and things of the like in that regard. And that will also play into her active choices, which we'll discuss down the line here as we dive in. But other than that, she's your typical DPS type stat, and she is going to be your main front runner of attack. One of the biggest things to understand here is this bar down below when she's Cartethyia. This bar with the swords right here, as you can see, is like her Forte circuit. And operating this will properly boost the damage Fleurdelys does. She has 3 different types of swords here. Okay, so we're going to show you right here. And these swords can be summoned here, each of which will trigger different buffs for the Fleurdelys transformation. Let's go over these. Okay, so first and foremost, Sword of Divinity. This will be your middle sword icon in your Forte bar. Making the sword appear, you will need to do 4 basic attacks. See how it's there at the bottom now, that green one? And you see the swords here right now. So that's how you're going to get this to appear. This is the Sword of Divinity, and it will stay here for 20 seconds. Okay, so that brings up another point, recalling your swords. So in order to recall your swords, you're going to want to jump, boom, attack, and then you see how it will thrust that one down. Now you can do this with all 3 swords out. As you can see on the icon down below, you can imagine there's 2 other swords. Yes, there are 2 other swords. And ideally speaking, if you want to maximize your damage, you will want all 3 of those swords at the same time. As you can see here, mid-air attack, 3 sword shadow recall, boom right here, which is a bit more higher on that modifier there. So if you can get that done, then you can, but you can also do it with 1 or 2. Doesn't matter. Either way, you can get that done with 1 or 2. You want to be utilizing this as much as you can, because there's no reason not to. It's some extra free damage, and it really kind of plays right into what you're doing in the first place. So do get comfortable with using that as you can. However, you'll probably, a quicker one to use will be the heavy attack one, which we'll go over next. And so that brings us to heavy attack, which is pretty straightforward. You're just going to heavy attack and you hold your normal attack button down, boom, and you see that brings that sword fairly quickly. So that's pretty nice because it does bring it out fairly quickly, which is very beneficial. You can see I have 2 swords out here right now, so if I just want to do with these 2, you toss those 2 down, of course, right? So that's going to be the same thing when you get 3 or if you have 1, either or. Remember that this scales off of basic attack damage. This heavy attack, this scales off of basic attack damage. Everything that she does scales off of basic attack damage. So remember, y'all, she likes basic attack damage. Do you understand that? She likes basic attack damage, as well as her HP ones, okay? Upon doing the heavy attack, another sword will be summoned. And per the previous mention, if you want to recall it and thrust it onto the mob, someone just needs to jump and attack to trigger the mid-air attack. Heavy attack option will summon the Sword of Discord Shadow. This is slot number 1 on your Forte circuit, as you can see down there below, whereas the 4-prong basic attack sword populates slot number 2, and that leaves us with, of course, slot number 3, which is her Resonance skill, which is very straightforward. A little like interdimensional blast there going on, and then a sword pops down. Very straightforward. You can pull all these out. Now you see we have 3 swords right here. Put them together. Boom. So you can do that, and that's always going to amplify some of your damage output by utilizing those swords and calling those things down like you're a freaking sword titan from outer space ready to battle a whole planetary beast like King Kong or something like that. Look, I'm just talking, okay? Anyways, the name of that one is Sword of Virtue. That will populate your 3rd slot. Now that you get the general idea of that, before I go into the buffs that they give, understand that it's really irrelevant because just straight up, just make sure you have all 3 swords. It's really that simple. Just make sure you have all 3 swords. Because you're not going to have to worry about it if you just have all 3 swords. And you're going to be attacking, you're going to be using your basic attack, your elemental skill, your heavy attack. It's going to come natural. So just don't even worry about it overly too much. Just understand that you need all 3 of these and they will all give buffs when you're in Fleurdelys' form. So let's go over those buffs that you're going to get. And so these buffs are as so. So you're going to have your Power of Discord, which is going to be the heavy attack sword, okay? So it's going to be a heavy attack sword, which is going to raise area erosion stacks to max across all mobs. Remember, high area erosion stacks is good, as much of this stuff operates around more area erosion equals damage bonus on top of the death over time that area erosion gives as well. Sword 2 is going to be, not trying to make this not confusing, but Sword 2, so that's Sword 1, that's the heavy attack. Sword 2 is going to be the basic attack one, which is going to be the Mandate of Divinity. Mandate of Divinity is going to give area erosion damage to amplify by 50%, and trigger interval decrease by 50%. Naturally, this cycles right back up to the previous one that we were just talking about with the area erosion, so those play hand in hand. And then lastly, Sword 3, which is the Heart of Virtue, which is the Resonance skill right here, is going to stagnate targets and provides enhanced resistance for Fleurdelys. So these are very straightforward. Just understand, like I said, the big thing, just make sure you have all 3 swords, and then you're going to get these buffs. Like, don't even overly think about it. Just understand, I need all 3 swords when I'm playing in Fleurdelys at the very beginning. So once again, I'm not going to go crazy in detail over these because obviously you just need the general idea. So that's really where I just want to touch that there, and then we can just kind of move on. On the subject of area erosion, however, and the damage increase I mentioned earlier, keep in mind that she has this passive talent, Winds Indelible. So as you see here, Indelible Imprint. Targets with 1 to 3 stacks of area erosion take 30% more damage from Cartethyia and Fleurdelys. Targets with more than 3 stacks of area erosion additionally take 10% more damage from Cartethyia and Fleurdelys. For each stack of area erosion, they have up to 3 stacks. So, area erosion, as you can see here, area erosion. Remember, all this area erosion is always good stuff. So, do understand that, and do understand that you get increased damage in that regard. So, how do these sort buffs take effect when you transfer them to Fleurdelys? You might be asking. Because you're like, okay, well, do we get these buffs at all times? All day, every day, anyway? Whatever we do, we get these freaking sword buffs? Oh my goodness, this is crazy. Not quite exactly. You don't get these sword buffs exactly. There's so much stuff on this. You don't get these exactly. So pretty much how this works is that these operate in manifests. So as you see here, at the very top here, you're going to see manifest right here. So manifest lasts for 12 seconds. And during manifest is when these buffs are going to be active. So just understand in the first 12 seconds, that's when you're going to see these things being active. So if we can go over here, we can kind of transform. We can slap this guy. Dude, I do not like these mobs whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. These guys are annoying as hell. But we'll pop these guys over here. If we can, without this guy completely rocking me. These guys are doing the absolute most. Okay. So as you see here, so now we're in manifest mode. So when we're in manifest mode, these buffs are active, okay? For 12 seconds, we are in manifest mode, these buffs are active. Now, also note that when you're in this mode, you can switch out, you can change over there, and you see I'm back in Cartethyia. Also, understand here that you can switch back into Fleurdelys whenever you want to here, because manifest is paused when you switch over here. So as you see that bar down there, the liberation bar, it's kind of like halfway with the energy there because manifest is still going on. So if I switch back to that, manifest will continue to go, and that's 12 seconds will eventually go up. And now you see it's no longer going crazy there, so if I switch back, then it will pop me right back into having to build up my liberation again, as you see right there. So manifest does pause if you switch over to Cartethyia during that phase. So if you want to switch over to her during that time, you can if you would like to do that. But we'll touch on that a bit later about switching back over. But pretty much just view that manifest mode as like Goku doing the Kaioken in Dragon Ball. So it's like a big strong burst of power for a short amount of time, right? Just picture it like that. That's basically like the best way to look at it. You're doing the freaking Kaioken. It's a really big burst of power. And do also understand that when you're in that, you're going to be removing air erosion stacks as well. So as you see right here, it's going to say right here, instantly trigger 1 instance of air erosion damage and reduce the air erosion stack on the target hit by 1. Also note that as you see my HP right there is at 50%. This is because of when you transform to Fleurdelys initially, your HP is going to drop 50%. Now it will go back up once you build her Liberation out, which is her ultimate attack in Fleurdelys mode, and she will regain 50% of your max HP. So that will go back to full, assuming you don't take damage, but you will get 50% of your max HP when using your Liberation. But that's why you're seeing your HP gone right there, in case you were wondering in that regard. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get into Fleurdelys here. Just going to dive right in. And let's go ahead and get right into her. Then I'm just going to kind of just leave this guy. Because I actually don't really care for that. We're just going to leave this guy and go somewhere else. I just want to show you in here. Oh, get off me. Get off me. Get off of me. Get off of me. As you can see here, we are in Fleurdelys right now. So you're going to be looking at Conviction. Conviction is the bar that you're seeing at the very bottom, as well as the bar that you're seeing around the Liberation. These are one and the same, okay? These are one and the same, so don't get confused there. You're like, well, what's this bar? What's that bar? So and so and so. This is just your Liberation bar when you're in Fleurdelys. It's as simple as that. So when you're seeing one building, the other one's building as well. They're both going to build. And that is what you're looking for when it's 100%. That is going to give you. You see it's building right now. Look at both of them. They're both building. And you'll see once it's 100%, that's when you have your Liberation as Fleurdelys. We have no HP going on here right here, but and now see now it's max. See they're both flashing as your Conviction. So now once we use this Liberation, we're going to get 50% HP back of our max HP, and we're going to of course do a lot of damage with a crazy attack that has very nice range on it, as you can see there. And so as you see, our HP is back as well. We got some HP back. Of course, we're not running this in like full rotations or anything like that, so we're not maximizing on all the bonuses that we would have there with the arrow damage and all that stuff. So, but nonetheless, you see there the Conviction bar is what we wanted to point out there, and that is the Forte circuit when you're in Fleurdelys, and the bar that's going around her little character model where the Liberation circle is at. They're both one and the same. So that's what I really want y'all to understand in regards to the Conviction there. That's what Conviction is. And Conviction will start at 0, as seen here. It will start at 0. See, she has none. So it will start at 0. Remember, if we want to switch up, we can always change out. You can change back into her if you want, because back into her, she'll still be there. But nonetheless, that is how Conviction works, so I wanted to make sure that y'all were aware of that. Now, combat in Fleurdelys is pretty straightforward on that. Basically, everything you do is going to do damage. So it's pretty much just let me come in here and smash, 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 smash. That's really what's going to happen there. So pretty much just go crazy with it. Remember that this character likes basic attack damage, so you preferably want some modifiers, on there for your basic attack damage. And I'm purposely not running this fully, like using Ciaccona with all the air damage bonus, just so I can just kind of stay in here, just kind of mess with this guy a bit longer. But just understand that pretty much, there's nothing real overly fancy about Fleurdelys. When she's in her mode, you just do damage. You just do damage, as simple as that. The thing also that you will note that I mentioned earlier is that there's no jump. That's her jump right there. That's her jump. So she does an upward attack there, which is nice as well, and it puts you in the air, which can start your onslaught there. Then also understand one thing is that her E. Her E, you could pop her E right there. You see the circle going around her E as it kind of cools down. If you press it again, you'll enter another attack right there. So you can have that option of using her E in that regard, kind of waiting a little bit or whatnot. Let's go into the air. You can kind of go into the air, get airborne with that. Boom, boom, boom. Let's use that E. You have time there if you want to hold it, or if you want to use it immediately, you can. You just go ahead and pop, finish it, boom, go down in there just like that. And of course, I would like to note this as well. That right there, that little charge right there, if you hold charge, and then normal attack, boom. So pop back and she'll do a little arrow blast as well. So I think that's also pretty neat. That can be utilized in different ways if you would like to utilize it like that, because it is a very useful tactic to kind of get distance between you and the mob that you're in. So once again, you can hold that, boom, back just like that. Hold it, boom, back. So you're holding heavy attack, then just click a normal attack, and that will gain some distance for you. But like I said, she's pretty straightforward in that you just go in here and you do damage, just like so. There's nothing too overly the top with it. You just go in and you do damage. Pop that like that if you want to. Pop that like that. As you see that elemental skill, when you press that second time, you will close it down. Of course, we're at conviction 100%, which I can stay in this mode indefinitely if I would like to, regardless if I have conviction at 100% or not. Remember, conviction is the bar at the bottom or the bar around her liberation right now. As you see, both of them are glowing. That is her conviction. And she builds her conviction simply by just attacking. Remember, it starts at 0 when you initially go into the phase, and once you use your liberation, of course, it will be gone. You can also switch, as you saw, whenever. So just by, you can be in Fleurdelys and you can switch out, and it's not going to penalize you. It's not going to change you back to Cartethyia. No, you could go back and you're still being Fleurdelys. So you can stay in her ultimately indefinitely. Obviously, there are exceptions, of course, such as interacting with things within the map, such as, you will be, if you're interacting with an NPC or you're hitting one of those little mouse things that make you run fast, then that will transform you back as well. So there are things that will cause you to, force you to change back into her if you are opting to just run as Fleurdelys at all times. But otherwise, you can stay in her as much as you want, quite frankly. You can say, as you see, it's a pretty crazy tactics here going on with her. She's a very quick, moving pace character, and very, very, very agile in how she attacks the mob and how she's going to deliver that final blow to you. Ouch, that was not very nice of you. I would like to note too that on her Resonance skill right here, the first one of it, so if I do that, that one actually does pull in mobs a little bit. However, you can't really tell because I am fighting this guy. But and then this one does not though, however. That one's just a big blast. But the first one will pull in mobs to a slight degree. If you were trying to, fight a bunch of mobs or whatnot, you'll kind of get some of that AoE pull-in area that you get with Ciaccona, as well as some other characters as well that have pull-in mechanics. But of course, nothing kind of beats Ciaccona. Ciaccona's pull-in mechanic is pretty crazy, so it is very useful as well. But nonetheless, in case you wanted to know that, that is something that is notable, that first one on this one does pull in some mobs around it, though it's a very small area. Alright, so this is a lot of action going on here. So let's take a little breather real quick and let's talk about the modifiers, the intro skill and the outro skill. This will be a real quick segment right here, but I just want to make sure that you're aware of things and make sure that you're very, well, good to go here. So her modifiers, as you can see, is straightforward, as we mentioned at kind of the top of the video. She wants HP and basic attack. You will see this in all of her modifiers. Every single freaking one of them. HP and basic attack. You will see that some of these modifiers are pretty heavy, which makes it very clear what's at to prioritize. So I cannot emphasize enough that you want HP. As you can clearly see as we scroll through these, you will also see that a lot of her uses are considered basic attacks. So basic attack damage right here, you see a lot of this basic attack damage. That goes across everywhere. You will see it everywhere. It says consider basic attack damage. So if you're looking at another substat to put on these, basic attack damage is that other substat that you want to have on there, paired with things like crit and, and HP, of course, right? Ultimately, HP reigns king. As you can see, so the modifiers are too substantial for it not to be HP reigning king here. But basic attack is something that you like to have in your substats if you can get it. Keep in mind that many of the nodes that you'll find on her skill tree get HP as well. So you see HP, 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 and the ones that are not HP are crit rate. So keep that in mind as well. Usually when you look at nodes, that kind of gives you a good idea of what you can kind of expect there. So also this here, just a little key note in case you're wondering. Healing received by all Resonators other than Cartethyia, Fleurdelys in the team is increased by 20%, and their resistance to interruption is enhanced. If Rover Aero is in the team, Aero Rover additionally restores 25 wind strings upon casting Omega Storm. We'll get to Aero Rover here in a second, by the way, but we're not going to do it right now. Then, of course, the Aalto skill. The arrow damage dealt by the active Resonator in the team other than Cartethyia or Fleurdelys to targets with negative statuses is amplified by 17.5% for 20 seconds. So this is definitely one that you want to trigger because this is going to amplify, okay, that arrow damage. This is definitely something that you want to trigger, especially, you want to be running a full arrow team if you are running one, which you probably are, because it will buff any and all arrow damage on your team outside of Cartethyia, under the condition that the mob has a negative status effect on it, such as area erosion, or even spectral FRAZZLE. Those are all negative statuses, as you see here. But just understand, negative status effects is the broader scope of death over time items that the game has introduced within the version 2 characters. The fact that this is applied to all negative status effects, however, opens up some potential doors on wacky team comps and optional side roles for Cartethyia to have in the future. So, the fact that this is, can work outside of just area erosion is pretty interesting. We'll be seeing some of these coming up. We'll be seeing Fusion Burst coming with Lupa, I'm sure, and some of these other ones coming down the line. But it's interesting that this does work. This does apply with all these. So it opens up some doors for some 2 arrow and, and 1 something else teams or something of the sort in that regard. So do keep that in mind as we move forward with the new character releases and updates. Now your intro skill is going to be pretty straightforward. If Cartethyia, you will deal arrow damage and inflict area erosion stacks while summoning a sword. If Fleurdelys, you will thrust forward and deal arrow damage whilst restoring conviction, which is, remember, conviction is your bar that builds up your big weapon, sword, liberation ultimate when you're in Fleurdelys. It's on your bottom and on the side right with the face icon over it. So that will build up conviction. But these are pretty straightforward, nothing too fancy here with your intro skills. Now I'm sure y'all are all wondering about echoes, of course. Echoes can get a little different here, and that's something that y'all need to understand first and foremost off the bat. So let's dive into the echoes a little bit and explain to you why you're going to be doing these things. The set that you want for her is going to be the Windward Pilgrimage. This is a newer set, as you can see here. So it's going to be a bit more of a pain in the rear to farm because obviously you have to kind of start from scratch, right? But it's very obvious why you want this, as you can see right here. Hitting a target with area erosion increases crit rate by 10% and grants 30% arrow damage bonus lasting 10 seconds, which is ridiculous. In other words, this is 100% uptime because you're always going to have area erosion on a mob. That's guaranteed pretty much. If you're running her in a typical setup, you're going to have area erosion on the mob, period. If you haven't noticed already though, I'm not wearing any 3 pieces over here on my echo sets. You'll see I'm not wearing any 3 pieces. So you normally would have a 4 and a 3/3 with an arrow damage bonus, or the element damage bonus that you're playing for that character. However, she can get an absurd amount of arrow damage bonus buffs as is, and as such opens up different doors. Keep in mind, the 4-star Fleurdelys Echo that should be in your main slot is also going to give you another 20% arrow damage. You get 10% off the jump, but if you're one of these 2 characters, you get another 10%. So that's 20% arrow damage off the jump. Now you look at some of your supporting characters' echoes using Gust of Welkin. So let's go over to Ciaccona, who's using Gust of Welkin over here. And you will see this will add another 15% here. So inflicting area erosion upon enemies increase arrow damage for all Resonators in the team by 15%. And for the Resonator triggering, that doesn't matter for this, but she gets an extra bonus, of course. Okay? So that adds it to the entire party. The unique Rover story weapon also can add some of that juice as well. So let's go back over here, and we can go to this. So as you see here, this is also going to arrow damage dealt by nearby Resonators on the field is amplified by 10%. Okay? So you're also going to get some arrow damage juice going on here. So these are also bonuses as well. Now this says amplified, So this actually might not be an arrow damage bonus. It actually might register as different because it's amplified and not straight arrow damage bonus. So do keep that in mind as well, actually. But nonetheless, you get a whole bunch of arrow damage bonuses throughout playing with her. She's pretty much going to play on her arrow damage bonus. When you are in action, this thing is pretty much going to be at 99%. So that's why when you go back to these echoes, you're going to see here that we opt to not use that. We opt to not use that. And then, of course, if you're running a Ciaccona team, you're going to be getting an even more massive air damage bonus, such as the 24% one. That's virtually 100% uptime. That comes from her Resonance skill right here, which I'm not sure what the definition is going to be. I know it comes from base attack. Solo Concert. Solo Concert, where you at? Solo Concert gives 24% air damage bonus. So as you see, it's just loaded. And if you're running her with it in a Ciaccona team, you're going to have 99% at all times. It's pretty much impossible not to. So that's why when you go back over to these echoes, you do not want to have 3-slot arrow damage echoes if you're running in such a team, because that's not going to do anything for you. That's diminishing returns. You're not going to get anything from that. So because there's a whole lot of arrow damage bonus trickling in here, which is why the echoes for Cartethyia are likely going to appear different. Well, for her, you're going to have a 4-4-1-1. 1. With your 4s being your 2 crit options, crit rate and crit damage, and then these being your HPs down here. Now, there is an argument to be made that if you're not running her in a team that gives so much arrow damage buffs, then you may opt to utilize a more arrow damage traditional setup. However, even with that, I would probably say that even if you were going to explore that, I would still probably only use one arrow damage one, and then the other 3 would be an HP. That's what I would probably do if I was going to explore that. Like if you're running in a setup that doesn't have, these kind of premium characters that are giving arrow damage bonus, then that is an option for you to maybe experiment with that. With 1-3, that's a arrow damage, and the other 3 is an HP. Because you're still going to want that HP regardless, and either way, you're still going to get a lot of arrow damage in the first place. Yeah, it's like just regardless, you're going to. You're probably going to play her with Rover if you're not playing her with Ciaccona, which is still going to give some bonuses, area erosion. It's just you're still going to have a good amount of air damage bonus, but that is a possible argument if you wanted to go that route. So do keep that in mind if you do not have, Ciaccona or whatnot, and you're kind of looking at some other options. But just keep a good eye on your stat, your 99% stat, well, probably 99%, over on her bar right here. If you're fighting something and you want to open this up and check it, just kind of look at that and see what her air damage bonus is down here right there, and see where it's at while you're in combat. Okay, now of course in regards to Kelpie, that's why we were over there. You will want to farm this guy. This is her other option. She only has just these 2 options right here. So these are her options. So you will of course need the sword, and you will need this baby right here, Kelpie, who is also the new hologram, which we just beat down on a little while before making this video. Hey, Kelpie can also be used as a better slot option for Ciaccona, by the way. This is just a heads up here in case y'all are, well, just to let y'all know. For Ciaccona, Kelpie can also be used as a better option. If you want to go that route, you can do that. Because Kelpie over here, as you can see, on the side right here, gives a 12% arrow damage bonus. Also, switching out the Resonator with Aalto skill summons Nightmares. Kelpie deals some more arrow damage to them. Now, the reason why this here is better is because it gives 12%. Whereas on the current Echo right here, this guy gives 10%, but remember, we're not any of these 2 characters. So that means that we're not getting this benefit of 10% extra down here that they're getting. So you're getting 10% here. Now, it's really not that big of a difference. It's 2% more that you're getting there. And, maybe that mob does a bit more damage as it Aalto skills, activates on Aalto skill. So that is an option. But if you already have one of these and it's built and has the stats that you want on it, then don't overly worry about it. But if you don't, and maybe you're starting out fresh, if you're just building her, then go for this one. Go for this this Echo, preferably, over going for this one, because it does benefit Ciaccona more. But that's just for Ciaccona. Of course, for our girl over here, you still want to be using this because she does apply to this down here. she is one of these two characters. As such, you want to be using this. But that's just a little heads up there, a little sneak peek there in case y'all were wondering about Ciaccona. Now, while we're here, let's touch on the Aero Rover. Okay, I want to stop here and note some things. I'm not going to go heavy into Aero Rover's gameplay because I made a guide about him before, which you can check out. It goes over the mechanics and his kit, but I want to highlight some things here in some different ways that he can be played in this comp, as he can also operate as an even stronger DPS now. Note the new set of echoes that Cartethyia uses, seen right here, the Windward Pilgrimage. Note this. So what does this read? This reads air damage plus 10%. Hitting a target with air erosion increases crit rate plus 10% and grants 30% arrow damage bonus, right? This will further boost damage output on the Aero Rover. This can be both inside and outside of the Cartethyia group. Keep in mind that while Gust of Welcome is a great option, which we currently have on him, it's a great option, right? But keep in mind, for Aero Rover, especially if running in virtually any other team that's not an Aero Erosion one, Aero Rover can only trigger Aero Erosion by converting a negative status effect that is not Aero Erosion. Okay? That is not Aero Erosion. Where's this thing at? So as seen right here, while in midair, press Resonant skill to deal arrow damage, which removes all stacks of death over times, negative status effects, and inflicts an Aero Erosion. Okay, so what does that say to us right now? Well, we have a Gust of Welcome on here, and, you know, inflicting air erosion upon enemies increases air. But we can't inflict arrow erosion because we're in an all arrow team. No one's using any other negative status effects, so you're not getting this, which is why this new one, would be a better option to run on the Aero Rover. Like, hands down, you're getting a 30% air damage bonus. That's adding to your DPS or rotational output. Hands down, it would be the better option to use if you're running your Aero Rover in a type of DPS build. Of course, there's always the option of running him as a main healer, which is your rejuvenating low. That's always an option as well. But if you were using this Gust of Welcome, you're running it in this full Aero team, then your better option would be to do this. Use the Windward Pilgrimage for the Aero Rover. That will benefit you more than this one will, the Gust of Welcome. But of course, you know, if you're running any other team with people who have negative status effects, so maybe someone coming up and you're running with Lupo or whatever, yes, then he can convert Aero Erosion by converting that. It's just because the negative status effect that's being implemented with this team is Aero Erosion. So you can't convert Aero Erosion to Aero Erosion. That's not converting. You're not converting anything there. And as such, Aero Rover cannot inflict Aero Erosion on these. It is impossible for him to trigger Aero Erosion unless, for some reason, you're opting to run Ciaccona in SPECTRO FRAZZLE mode, which is in fact an option and not necessarily a bad one at that. And I'll show you all that as well, as he will be able to convert those SPECTRO FRAZZLE stacks and trigger Aero Erosion. However, Ciaccona is a more natural Aero Erosion applicator for this job. As such, you could potentially opt to equip Aero Rover with that same set that Cartethyia is using, except in your more traditional standard setup. So you'll have a 4-3-3, 1-1 here. Instead of, you're not going to do a 4-4 or 1-1-1 with that. No, you would have your more traditional setup just like this. It's just a different echo set. That's it. Simple as that. Or you can opt to run them as a healer. That's also an option. So let's show this some gameplay examples as well. In regards to this, using actual SPECTRO FRAZZLE on Ciaccona, where I'm saying that this actually can work because you can have them applied together at the same time. This actually is possible to do. Hopefully this person doesn't die so quickly. But as you can see here, and we'll go into this, so we'll press A to go into SPECTRO FRAZZLE, which is going to now put Spectral, which allows him to put on those stacks. It also allows us to have both SPECTRO FRAZZLE and Aero Erosion up at the same time. So this can actually be very beneficial because these characters do apply Aero Erosion at a very high rate in the first place, which means that you can have both of these up freely as you would like to. As you see, you're getting double the dots. double the freaking dot there, as you see those numbers going up there constantly with both Aero Erosion and Spectral Frazzle. So this is a way to play this comp right here, and it can very well work because you are already getting so much Aero Erosion to begin with. So we'll run it one more time here. Make sure you pop that arrow damage boost down with Ciaccona. As you see that with the solo song, we have a guide for Ciaccona if you haven't seen it already. But of course, you're relying on the liberation to really, you know, get that conversion on that. And so now we have some juice here, so we'll run it one more time. Just kind of give another. Actually, we'll go to something that might last a bit longer. I think this guy will last longer. He probably won't. Let's be honest. Let's be completely honest. We're probably being too optimistic here. This guy's gonna die just as quick as that guy did. So we'll go to this guy, but now we have some juice here. We're pretty close on our liberation with her. So we can show us come in here and just kind of showcase right there, okay? But I think this guy moves around a lot too. That's also a bad thing. Okay, so now we're in Spectro there. And we can kind of just apply there and you see how it kind of works together. As you see, like so. You see, so this definitely is a very viable option and it works. Quite frankly, it's probably the better option in a lot of scenarios, as you will dish out more damage. It's probably the better option to use. However, a lot of people may not realize that and opt to just straightforward run in the Aero Erosion Ciaccona mode. But if you're running in this team, this option is very much one that you should consider. Now, it would be dependent on what mob you're fighting, how comfortable you are with it, and, you know, if you really want to mess around with having to, you know, kind of remember to press the A button to go into the Spectral Frazzle mode, because obviously by default, she goes into Aero Erosion mode, Ciaccona does. So that's entirely up to you in that regard, but it is an option, 100%, to play it in this regard if you were running with these guys right here, because you will allow yourself to be able to convert that, and you know you're already getting on a whole lot of Aero Erosion stacks already in the first place, so it doesn't really hurt to have both of them on there, because these two already apply so much as is, as you will see. So as you see, both of them living their lives right there, stacking up, that death over time just going crazy, going absolutely ham. So that is a sneak trick of how you would want to run this team if you have these three together, and you can really maximize your damage because you're getting double the dot. Otherwise, you're not really getting that double the dot on Aero Erosion alone. So keep that in mind. Put you on game in case you're trying to maximize and go to another level there. Like I said, it's just the only things that's annoying there is that obviously you have to remember to press A, whereas it's real easy to just use your liberation and then just switch out immediately and not really have to worry about anything. Otherwise, you know, you have to wait for the little prompt and press A so we can go to Spectro mode. So entirely up to you. Either way you're going to do damage. Either way it's going to be big boy damage. So either way you're winning. Now, while we're on the subject of team comps, that brings us right into this. So the first team comp is obviously the one that you're looking at right here, which we have pretty much just showcased in its entirety, so I don't really need to go over it. But this is pretty much going to be your A1 premium team right here that you would like to have, idealistically speaking, to run at your maximum with Cartethyia. That's going to be this team right here, the Aero Rover, Ciaccona, and her. Now, another team that you could potentially use is Cartethyia. I always say her name wrong, by the way. I never know how exactly it's pronounced in the story. But you can also use Cartethyia, Aero Rover, and Phoebe as well, which could potentially work. You know, stronger in, but likely slower building, because of course you have to apply those Spectral Frazzle stacks. But if you wanted to do that, that is an option as well that you could do. However, it doesn't work necessarily the best, but we could kind of showcase it here. And of course, you'll want to use your confession mode. Oh, I gotta wait for this guy to come down. Don't want to waste that. But of course, it's going to be a bit slower building because you're kind of relying on getting those in there. Whereas it doesn't really do a whole lot. But you can use her as always as an outro support here, because her outro is goated. Absolutely goated. And I convert those there, as you see there. Because remember, I'm converting those negative status effects. And then you can kind of go into there and play as you must. So it's not necessarily the best of options, but it is an option. She has a lot of options because she's strong as hell. Plain and simple. She has a lot of options because she's strong as hell. Phoebe's also strong, so playing them together, that is an option if you would like to do that, in case you were wondering. There's also a Cartethyia, however you say her name, Verina and Shorekeeper, or Verina or Shorekeeper, and Aalto. So this is, you know, an option that you can also have if you're kind of more free to play and you don't really have these characters to use. You could use this as an option as well. So let's find Aalto down here. There you go. And remember, Aalto has this Aalto skill, which amplifies arrow damage amplified by 23%. We talked about this before in my Aero Rover video as well. So keep that in mind. We always do lots of testing with different characters. So you could opt to do this. Verina could be Shorekeeper as well. So I don't have Shorekeeper. I opted not to pull her. But this build is for Shorekeeper or Verina. So you could opt to do this as well. Of course, Shorekeeper, Verina, they're just applying your typical buffs as they're going to do. That's their whole role. That's what their role always is. So they're going to be applying your typical buffs, of course. So I would want to go into here. And then I will likely want to switch out into her, because now I'm getting that amplified buff there. As you can see, that arrow damage boost. So I'm getting that buff there. Of course, in terms of Verina, you also get a buff by switching out into that character as well. So it depends on how you really want to do that, but if you have your Aalto geared, you can potentially switch out from Verina to Aalto, get some damage going on there, and then switch into Cartethyia in that regard. So that way you have the arrow damage amplified on her, and you get the little damage boost on Aalto. So that is an option as well. And so for Aalto, I actually have him built. I'm waiting to get this standard pistol because nothing too fancy there. This has energy regen, because I'm just trying to build it. It's just pretty much just being used for that Aalto skill. So that's why I haven't built the way that I haven't built. However, you could modify this around, potentially put him on this guy right here. You could really put him on this guy right here if you really wanted to, because Cartethyia applies area erosion stacks regardless. So he would benefit from this. However, you just want to make sure you have energy regen, so where you're kind of able to, you know, get things popping and get things moving around. But you have him also as well at max here, so this also benefits. But remember, all these are just for him. None of the things that he does helps anyone else out besides his after skill. Otherwise, everything else just benefits him. So keep that in mind in that regard. But you could opt to play this, you know, if you don't have these other options. You have Verina as a standard banner character, and Aalto, that's a free character pretty much. So this is an option that you could use as well if you're trying to, you know, just figure out, you just pulled Cartethyia, and you're like, you're just trying to make something work, okay? Now you can also use Jianxin and Ciaccona. So let's go do that. This is also an option you can use as well. This is another full arrow team. So this is an option that is viable as well. However, it will be a bit slower because of the shield builds, and Jianxin kind of wants uptime on the field as well to begin with. So because you're not really giving her that uptime, it's kind of, you're kind of putting two what would be kind of like main DPS just kind of out there, which doesn't really do a whole lot, but it can work, and you can use it for the shield properties and the healing properties that she also provides. So we go into this here. Of course, we're not going to go into SPECTRO FRAZZLE mode, but we can change into this here. But remember that we're getting all this arrow damage bonus buffs as well. So she's going to benefit from these arrow damage bonuses. Like if we were to go to her right now and open this up, you're going to benefit from some arrow damage bonuses at 131 right there. And then of course, she's going to be arrow damage bonuses up here as well. It's going to be at 69, not nearly as much, but you're going to get some bonuses there from all these arrow damage buffs that we're getting across the board. And see, with her, she uses her shield. That's usually going to be part of her main kit, which means that you're taking away uptime from Cartethyia. So while this is an option, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it is an option. So it's to really amplify on the arrow damage bonus that you have here. So that is an option. You know, if you have Ciaccona, then that is an option. But if you have Ciaccona in the first place, then you're probably going to want to use Aero Rover either way, right? Because you have Aero Rover, so you're probably going to want to do that. Then there's the interesting combination here, which is Aalto here. We can find them. There we go. So Aalto, Cartethyia, and Ciaccona. Now remember, Aalto gives that damage amplified by 23%. So this actually does work as well, surprisingly well. Of course, by running this comp you don't have a healer. So naturally that presents a problem. However, you will get that amplified damage on that arrow, which can be beneficial. Can be extremely beneficial, of course. So if I want to use that and then go into that, of course, you're going to see that amplified at work. You can see that HP dropping. This is kind of a hidden group that I kind of stumbled upon here that can and will work and works pretty darn well. HP drops like crazy. But like I said, the biggest thing here is that there is no sustain within this group. So you have no means of healing yourself, of surviving, of, you know, if you're in a really tough battle with a big boss, then there's not a whole lot of, you know, survivability factor within this group. However, this group does work. Like I mentioned before, the dialogue that is set there is damage, arrow damage amplified. And so I think that applies differently than arrow damage bonus. That's how that works. From my understanding, that applies differently than arrow damage bonus. Because I did testing on this, and I'm telling you for certain that damage, you see that thing? You see it going crazy right there? I'm telling you for certain that thing is definitely active. It definitely is making a difference, as you just saw that HP bar drop. So this is kind of a hidden team that I was, you know, surprised at, because it worked very, very well, almost better than pretty much any other team. However, it's just that there's no sustain. And so it would take some tweaking to really maximize it. And I would really want to work with some different echoes and continue testing it, and I will continue testing it. But this is an option, a kind of a hidden option for you to kind of play with outside of doing Aero Rover, which is, of course, will be your other main option in place of Aalto in this team comp. But this is very efficient. And then last but not least, an option for you to play here would be Aalto staying in here and using Aero Rover. Now, in this team comp, you would need to have Aero Rover in a rejuvenating build. You would need him as your healer because it's just too wonky of a build to really have him running with, you know, Gust of Welcome or the other one. You would probably want to put maybe him in the more recent set, the Windward Pilgrimage, and then have Aero Rover in a rejuvenating set potentially is what you would want to do here in this regard. So that could potentially work. However, it's not, you know, it's definitely not one of your best of options. I definitely would not necessarily recommend it. But if you're really kind of struggling on characters and you're like, okay, well, I'm just trying to make something work, then, you know, then you can do that. And this will, whoops, I didn't do that. I should have popped it. Then that can work, and it will work because Aero Rover is a strong healer when you're in rejuvenating and you have Cartethyia in your party because she gives a boost to his healing, his or her healing. So this is an option that you can run with, and you're getting that amplified damage bonus from Aalto still at the same time. So it's still going to output a good amount of damage regardless, either way. Okay? So the biggest issue with some of these teams, though, is that most of the premium ones, you're crashing out like a, you know, a much higher arrow damage bonus. Whereas in a lot of the lower tiers, you're really kind of sitting around like 60% or so on your arrow damage bonus on her. So you're really looking at around 60% on a lot of these other like non-premium teams. Whereas your arrow damage bonus will be much higher in these other premium teams. So that makes a very big difference. But ultimately run what's available to you, depending on your situation. Which brings us to weapons. Y'all want to change scenery here? At least we were just chilling here for a while. You can go over here. No, we're going to go over to like where a mob is at. No, we don't want to go over here because we were just over here, right? Which brings up weapons. So of course you're going to have the Defier's Thorn, which is her main weapon right here. Which is the weapon that you want to use, obviously. It's her signature weapon. So you're going to want to use this, which is going to be massive on her HP. Remember, she loves HP, and it gives even more HP within the definition of it. Also, it takes away defense, ignores defense, and it also amplifies damage for area erosion. So it's a very, very beautiful piece. If you can get this sword, obviously get the freaking sword if you can. But if you can't, there's always other options. They're just, none of them are even remotely as good as this one. So your other options would of course be your standard weapon, your standard 5-star such as Emerald of Genesis. This could work. You have the crit rate on there, which is beneficial. You have some energy regen on there, and this attack, but attack doesn't necessarily ever hurt. It's just that she really wants HP. But this is an option as well. Then of course for 4-star options, your only viable options here would be the Commando Conviction and the Endless Collapse. Now, realistically speaking, none of these weapons are very, like, compared to this, are very good. Because none of these weapons give HP. And she wants HP, and this gives a massive amount of HP. So, because there's no weapons that actually give HP, realistically speaking, none of these weapons are necessarily viable. However, if you had to use these, then these would be your 4-stars, but preferably try to get at least a 5-star standard banner weapon here. And of course, if you have some of the other signature weapons, some of those can work as well. So some of those, just for their stats. Like, none of them have HP, but for their stats. Some of them, enhance resonant skill or have crit rate or crit damage or whatever. So some of those other signature 5-star weapons can work as well. But obviously, if you can get her signature weapon, then you want her signature weapon because the HP. She wants HP. So there's nothing that's comparable. Now, in regards to exploration, y'all, because I'm sure you always wonder about exploration because we all know how great Phoebe is with exploration. Phoebe is still the goated of exploration, by the way. In case you were wondering, she is still the undisputed goated of exploration. There's no one who defeats Phoebe when it comes to exploration. However, Cartethyia Fleurdelys does have some nice exploration options. And so we can show those right here. We're going to transform into her. I believe I usually have my healer in this slot, don't I? All right. We do a quick setup. Bang, bang, switch those out. So that way it's a bit more. There we go. So we can show this right here. Now, in this normal form, she doesn't really have much exploration. I mean, she runs, she jumps. that's her exploration, okay? She runs and she jumps. However, if you are in Fleurdelys, you will notice that she can run across the surface of water. Now, as you see, the stamina bar is going down. This is at the expense of stamina. But she can do this indefinitely until that stamina runs out. So that's pretty nice if you want to traverse something. And it goes pretty long. Your stamina bar is pretty big. Of course, when your stamina bar goes off, this will go away. And she will fall into the water. And if you are on the water, you will die. So keep that in mind. Of course, when you go back onto surface, then that stamina bar is going to come right back up. Remember, you can stay in her indefinitely if you want to. So you can switch. You can stay right back into her. So keep that in mind for exploration. That is an option for her. That's where she really comes into play. However, remember, she does have a really big obstacle here in that walls are her worst enemy. She cannot do walls. She cannot jump over ledges. I mean, I guess she could do that and kind of jump, I guess. Technically speaking, I guess you could use that as a way of jumping up. It does jump, so I mean, yeah, I guess that works. But if you're trying to, just swiftly, oh, here's a wall, let's climb up the wall. Nope, you're not going up that wall. Sorry, buddy. That is not happening. Nope, not today. Nope, absolutely not. But nonetheless, y'all, that about wraps it up for this Cartethyia Fleurdelys guide. Pretty sure I touched on just about everything. As y'all are used to, my guys are always super in-depth. They always explain things to you and present things to you in ways that you would have never thought about them. Especially, I like to run the different team comps and really test things out that are outside of the meta to really dive in and evaluate these characters for what they truly are. So, tell me how you're enjoying this character, how you've been benefiting from her in your runs. If you're going to run some of these different team comps that we have here, remember, she loves HP. If you're trying to build her, if you haven't built her yet, she loves HP. But all in all, she's a megalith of a unit. She is pretty much like Zanny tier. I think Zanny's still the strongest character in the game when paired with Phoebe. Like, honestly speaking, Zanny's honestly brokenly strong. But she is right up there in terms of just pure raw power and demolishing everything and anything. Plus, she walks on water. And she has probably some assets that y'all are probably oogling over, which we're not going to entertain. But look, everyone buys and gets their characters for whatever reason, pulls their characters for whatever reason. So, I'm not here to judge. At any rate, y'all, be sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below. It really helps out tremendously. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know what you're looking forward to. Of course, we'll have a guide for Lupa and all the characters coming forward. And hopefully they're not as intricate as this character is, because this character took a lot of time for me to test, as y'all could tell. And it took a while for me to fully compile a list of things I want to go over and fully test things and run numbers the way I properly do. So hopefully Lupa's freaking, tree isn't this right here. Like, bro, oh my goodness, this right here, oh my goodness, there's so much. Hopefully Lupa's tree is not like that, which I'm sure it's not, because I don't think she has 2 forms. I hope not. Like, give me a break, at least wait like a couple of months or something. But nonetheless, y'all, like I said, be sure to like, subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. And Fleurdelys says good night, goodbye, and have a lovely day. Holla.
SPECTRO content.